Hey everybody, Joe Joseph here for thedailySheeple.com, and this is your news shot. ZeroHedge.com has a great piece, mirrored a blog entry from Tim Knight over at the Slope of Hope. What rich used to be. And I thought it was pretty fitting considering he and I both kind of grew up in very similar situations. And nostalgic in a way, but also kind of depressing considering where we are today. He says, I've had a lifelong fascination with wealth and more recently wealth disparity. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a happy, financially secure, but very much middle-class family. He says, everyone I knew had the same situation. We all pretty much had the same kind of house, the same quality of toys, the same simple vacations. Everything was so equal. You'd think we were living in some kind of socialist paradise. Of course, we weren't. And there was naturally one rich kid in the neighborhood. Everything about his life was just a little bit nicer, starting with the house that he lived in. As a youngster, I was acutely aware of many differences between the life I had and the one of my friend Steven, a.k.a. the rich kid. Although many decades have passed since then, I don't have to even try to remember some of those contrasts. Now, these are very fitting contrasts because anybody out there that grew up in a middle-class family, somebody had one of those friends that just had everything, right? And it was kind of, even when you were middle class, you didn't have the materialism to the extent or the level that we have today. Because things weren't as affordable as they are today. And I know a lot of people say, well, that's not necessarily the case. Maybe with some things. But when it came to the materialistic things, they were kind of more expensive. And I'll give you some examples here in a little bit. But listen to this. The first thing that he remembers is the white carpet. I hated white carpet. This is one of my most vivid memories of walking into Steven's house and seeing the stark white wall-to-wall carpeting. In my house, he said we had 4 kids, and white carpeting would have just been nuts to have. But in Steven's, there it was, white and looking good as new. It helped, I suppose, that there was plastic runners, so you'd have to walk on them, and as if it was like a plastic sidewalk inside the middle of the house. And even as a child, I thought it was kind of silly to have a carpet in the house and then lay down strips of plastic to protect it. But who was I to say? Says then there was the tree house. You see, in Steven's backyard, there was the most gorgeous tree house. His dad ran a Ford dealership, so I guess he could pretty easily afford to get a carpenter to come out to construct it for him. Now, he says, when I say gorgeous, all I mean was that it looked good to my 10-year-old eyes. It was just a simple cube, but it was made of high-quality wood, was obviously professionally constructed and conjured up with much envy from me. I asked my dad every summer if I could have a tree house, and the response was always the same. I'll think about it. And it never came. And then there was the fancy car and the dad's salaries. And finally, the boom boom cannon. He says, the one thing that's sting me most of all was one Christmas, my big gift was a plastic UFO that could fly by way of motorized propeller. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the damn thing to fly in spite of all my father's best efforts. So it was pretty disappointing. When I visited Steven to see what he got for Christmas, he was the proud owner of a tiny working cannon called the Boom Boom. Yeah, the safety concerns weren't really as prevalent in those days. It was an actual working cannon with gunpowder. It was made of nice heavy metal, and I'd never seen one before. It seemed just about the best toy imaginable. And it was interesting because those times were much more simple. But again, the materialism wasn't really there. You had to use your creativity, especially as a kid, You didn't have all of the toys given to you. Typically, you had to improvise using sticks and whatever else you could find at your disposal. Now, in 1982, I'm going to use that as a year to compare this year. In 1982, you had some stark contrasts on what things cost. For example, your yearly inflation rate in the USA in 1982 was 6.16%. So inflation was much higher in those days. The Dow Jones Industrial Average. Right now, I guess we've hit record highs. Back in 1982, it closed at 1,046 points. I think it's over 21,000 now. Now, the interest rate, the year-end interest rate for the Federal Reserve, 11.50%. Just recently, the Federal Reserve rate, the bank transfer rate, I think, is 2.14%. So much higher interest rate because you had, again, higher inflation. Interest rates were higher to try and stem it. And as a result, things cost more. Borrowing money costs more. But if you saved, you got paid more in interest. Banks had to pay more out. The average cost of a new house in 1982 was $82,200. That's across the United States. The median price of an existing home was $67,800. Good luck trying to find a $67,800 house that's nice. Here's a one for you. The average income per year, $21,050. I'd be interested to see what today's average income is and then adjust the $21,050 for inflation and see what comes up. Your average monthly rent was $320. You won't find that today. The cost of gas, 91 cents. A new car price averaged $7,983. Again, today you might not see that. A U.S. postage stamp cost 20 cents. Now, here's the interesting thing. Okay, now today you can get a laptop for like $200, right? Maybe even cheaper than that. In 1982, a Commodore VIC-20 cost $299.95. Now, in 1982, just as today, that's a lot of money, right? But people didn't get paid as much. See, so you didn't have a laptop for all the kids or all these electronic devices. You had a VIC-20, and that was the household computer. A 19-inch Sony color TV in 1982 cost $499. Again, when the average income per year was $21,050, you only had one TV in the house if you were lucky. Again, you didn't have one in every room of the house. If you wanted an outdoor gas grill, $199.95. A gas grill at that time was a luxury. A lot of people didn't have gas grills. They had charcoal grills. They were a lot cheaper. You know, a GMC 1500 pickup cost $5,400. Brand new out the door. Difference? Trucks didn't have all the bells and whistles that they do today. You know, when you got a truck, it was made to go to work. There was no extended cabs in 1982. And if you did have one, you know, you were extremely lucky. There were no frills. You might have air conditioning, you know, power windows, that kind of stuff. But really, you didn't have all of the stuff that you have today. A loaf of bread costs 50 cents. Now, adjust that for inflation because, you know, go to Wally World and you can get a loaf of bread for $1. So, a loaf of bread probably costs the same today as it did in 1982 when you adjust it for inflation. Some events that happened in 1982. Very interesting. You had the Argentina invade the Falkland Islands. Interestingly enough, that was the first war on record where both sides of the war used the same main battle rifle. They both utilized the Fabrique Nationale FAL. So the FNFAL. Very awesome weapon and one that was, again, just unbelievable. As a matter of fact, you had two versions of the FAL during that war. You had the automatic version and the semi-automatic version. The Argentinian military had the semi-automatic. The British had the automatic. And believe it or not, the Royal Army actually they would ditch their automatic for the semi-automatic just because those things kick like a mule and you couldn't hold them steady in automatic when you had it on full automatic. Just very interesting. Kind of useless knowledge there. Israeli forces invaded Lebanon in 1982. Israel returned Sinai to Egypt in 1982. And the first issue of USA Today was published. Epcot Center at Disney World was established in 1982. So very interesting things and events happened in 1982, but sometimes we don't understand. And a lot of people don't realize because, hey, maybe you weren't alive in 1982, that things were different. There were no free trade agreements. There were no frills and all this plastic electronic gadgetry. You know, if you were lucky, you had one of those handheld Tiger games. And even then, at best, I mean, it was horrible. But it's what you had, and it was cool. So, just some things to think about, and I thought that was awesome. What rich used to be. Kind of interesting to take 1982 and contrast it with where we are today. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's News Shot. Feel free to comment below and visit our website at thedailysheeple.com. Have a great day.